wanderers along the path of the beam! I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please ya, join the quartet here for a little palaver on Hail to Stephen King! That's right, bienvenidos, and welcome to the horror show. You can just call me Fuego for short, and as you can see by the stupid singing and all of the Stephen King books beside me, El Rey is my favorite of all time as far as authorship goes. And yes, thank you so very much for joining me for this program. I do twice a week, every spooktacular Saturday, or in the case of today, terrifying Tuesday. Yeah, and so I need to first and foremost give a grande gracias, the biggest shout out to the ever-growing quartet that is the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. This episode would not be in existence if not for Mr. Joshua Pruitt from that group, who is a frequent voice there. Shout out to you, good sir. If you guys have any other ideas that you just haven't thrown out in YouTube comments here, that's right, the Facebook group for Hail to Stephen King is a great place to do it. Well over 100 members now. I think we've got like 20-something new ones in just like the last week. It's ever growing, all kinds of awesome CRs, constant viewers as well, just big fans of, you know, Sai King himself, and yes, all kinds of great discussion going on there. I love it, I love it, I love it. It's been very humbling and honoring to see as the group has grown. So, Joshua Pruitt, man, gave the idea in a post just the other day. He said, if you could be in any Stephen King story, what would you want it to be? But on the flip side of the coin, there is any story you could avoid like the plague. Ha! What would it be? So I thought this was a damn good topic. I originally had something else lined up for today, but I was like, you know what? I'll just throw that back on the pile of ideas because I have an enormous spreadsheet with tons of different suggestions, tons of different ideas of my own, all kinds of other things from films that forgot the face of their father to upcoming anniversary coverage, the new monthly book club that is relaunching in conjunction with the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. So tons and tons of rad stuff. Can you tell that I'm out of breath from my little silly singing at the beginning? I actually think I need to put together like some silly intro song about long days and pleasant nights and all that silliness. But, so, to elaborate on this topic, I was just looking and looking and looking, like Brack show status, looking, and I was like, you know, I'm gonna put some of these together, but the list just kept growing and growing and growing, especially on the avoid like the plague side of things, because I was like, there's far more scenarios in Stephen King books that I would be scared shitless to be a part of, in contrast with ones where I would be intrigued to be a character in there and a part of the process and stuff like that. But, you know, without further ado, I guess maybe I'm not sure if I'm going to jump back and forth or if I'm just going to do, you know, one side and then the other side. Let's just play it by ear. You know, this is not a super scripted show. I like to keep it loose and fun here. But as I was looking at ideas that frightened me, I was definitely, you know, I would want no part of being in a lot of those short stories of King's, especially some of the earlier ones in Night Shift. I did a bunch of, well, I did comprehensive Night Shift 40th anniversary coverage just earlier this year, where I went I believe 4 stories at a time, and we did 5 different installments. So I didn't take the, you know, the shorten it down approach, which I talked about in one of my more recent episodes and stuff like that. You know, I like the long form content, and I know it's debatable about if something might potentially trend better if I condensed it, but I got a resounding response from the Hail Quartet on the YouTube comments basically saying, hey man, we like you just expounding on things and really giving your proper thoughts. I know this is like a glorified podcast at the end of the day, guys, so I'm sure a lot of you just throw this on and listen to me anyway, and I'm humbled and so supremely appreciative for that. But, I mean, some stuff in Night Shift, like, I would sure as hell not want to be a part of something like Graveyard Shift, man, where you're essentially tasked with going down into, you know, the recesses, these like lower levels of this mill that has not been cleaned in presumably decades, and as you get lower and lower down the levels and stuff like that, and you have to clean the hell out of this place where no humans have even been in for that extensive length of time, and the rats have mutated to these hideous and just disgusting sizes, and of course, since most of them haven't seen people in their whole lives, and they're not going to be scared of you or anything like that, not necessarily. I'm not the biggest fan of the film adaptation because it's always a gamble when someone is expanding on a King short story, you know, as opposed to condensing. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but I would not want to be the college boy that, you know, is stuck with just this frightening ordeal of just being caught. You know, I unfortunately have the same thing with rats as, you know, as the older Dr. Jones. So there you go. Another one that is from Night Shift that I would sure as hell not want to find myself in story-wise is the Mangler. I mean, you think about this huge bloodthirsty laundry press that has inadvertently just been placed with this black magic curse because of, like, you know, somehow I have Newt got in there and the blood of a virgin and all these different just crazy random things culminating together to make this thing, you know, just suddenly, you know, have this, you know, thirst for blood, something like that. God, the Mangler is so damn good. Another one where the expanded film, not so good, Al, if I'm gonna quote the Buddy Holly video by Weezer, but yeah, I mean, I love both of these short stories. Another one, sometimes they come back. I Would Be Scared Shitless. That is, that's actually a better adaptation, I think, you know, and they didn't really have too much they needed to expand upon. That was a Dino De Laurentiis, I want to believe, production. And while, you know, that adaptation was pretty good, just where they go in the short story, I would be so frightened. First and foremost, you have your brother, your sibling, who has been killed in this horrendous fashion by these terrible greaser bullies, and then all of a sudden they start popping up in your classroom when all you're doing is trying to, you know, impart insight and teach and do your bettering for all of society. You know, my father's a teacher, my youngest brother's a teacher. It's an unsung profession, guys. And all of a sudden, these little numbnuts start showing up looking exactly the same in your classroom. You know there's some very dark forces at work there, and I would be, yeah, I'd be absolutely terrified to find myself in that situation. Once again, avoid it like the Plizzeg, y'all. Man, just trying to breeze through at least a couple more of these. You know, if I'm gonna jump to another one that would be just terrifying, it's in, I believe it's in Skeleton Crew, if I'm not mistaken, and that would be The Raft. Like, they filmed that adaptation here for Creepshow 2 in Arizona, just up in Prescott, which is a little over an hour from me here in Phoenix. And you're out on the lake, you know, you're chilling, you've got some sexy babes with you, or, you know, or you've got some handsome dudes with you, or, you know, vice versa, whatever you're into. And all of a sudden, you're on this, like, you know, wooden, just kind of, you know, well, it's a big glorified raft. We're not thinking of, like, the raft that the kid from Jaws got torn to shreds on. But then all of a sudden, this crazy oil slick comes at you, and it starts basically eating your homies. I'm scared enough of water as it is, and I personally do not like swimming in lakes and rivers. I don't even like swimming in any, I'm not even the biggest fan of the ocean, man, because Jaws messed me up in the head, and I would be, once again, it's absolutely the thought of just what sort of weird gunks and trash and mutations and whatever could be in some of these areas that are, especially when it's a smaller like lake or something like that, the extent of pollution from partiers and people pissing and taking craps in there. I mean, who the hell knows what could potentially, you know, what could happen. And well, the short story, I find honestly, I personally like the adaptation better. The short story is very good. It's weird because in the short, the oil slick that they encounter that starts, you know, basically just, it's blob status, and I've said various times here on the horror show that the 1980s remake of The Blob is my favorite horror movie of all time. Aliens is more on the sci-fi side, so I can't mention that sequel as my favorite pure horror movie. But yeah, this oil slick is straight up the blob status. Strangely, in the short story, it almost like entrances our last surviving guy as opposed to him making the swim forward and I beat you and all that. But that, I could not hang, I could not deal with a situation like that, man. Another super frightening one would definitely be the short story, which borders on a novella. I think they even classify it as a novella, would be N. And N is about the idea of, can insanity be contagious? And if one person, you know, passes along the idea of something really crazy to another, can they in turn fall into that madness? And I mean, imagine being a shrink that hears about this crazy field that has these insane stones which basically double as a thinny, and you see these evil faces on them, and you just get crazier and crazier counting your steps and all these other things, and are eventually driven to suicide practically from the thought of this. I mean, what a horrible scenario to be in. That scares the crap out of me as well. So I think that's like a decent amount of honorable mentions. You know, I guess I could also say Children of the Corn, probably from Night Shift as well, just to backtrack briefly, because man, there's a reason it's been sequelized so many times. You know, it's the most sequelized of anything King period as far as adaptations go, and that's because religious fanaticism mixed with killer kids is creepy as fuck. Like, seriously. Anytime you have religious fanaticism period, whether it's The Mist, which would be another one that would be just horrible to find yourself in that, especially just the whole bunker mentality of, you know, that's more spreading of madness, that I would not want to be in that grocery store in The Mist, but I sure as hell wouldn't want to be outside the grocery store. So, you know, yeah, I gotta say, both of those, anytime that factor, you know, it just ups the crazy, and it ups just the unsettling nature, and once again, the situation that I would, no thank you, no gracias. So I'll cut it off there, because the rest are longer form stories and stuff like that. If I was to jump into a few shorter ones on the happy side, where I think it would be dope to be in this, I saw one, somebody brought this to my attention, and as I scrolled through every written King bit, you know, as I was trying to calm ideas, but this is one that I was like, yep, definitely Drunken Fireworks, which was released as a standalone story, eventually collected in The Bizarre Bad Dreams. I think it would be super fun to find yourself in the scenario of like a fireworks war that this lottery winner and his mother find themselves in, with this family on this other side of this lake in Maine, and that's got some Castle Rock ties, kind of, sort of. But it's not a dark story by any means. It's darkly comedic if you're gonna put yourself in that scenario. But going on the black market, like trying to find like bigger and crazier fireworks because you just have to outdo those people across the way from you. That's a fun story, guys. If you haven't checked out, it's one of, I'm not always super big on when King, you know, he tries to be funny. But in this scenario, it really works, and I think that this would be a very fun, just interplay and, you know, back and forth kind of thing to find yourself in the midst of. Drunken Fireworks, y'all, if you haven't got the chance to check it, that one is dope. Another short that I think, I was just talking with one of the constant viewers about this just the other day, because I think it's one of the most romantic stories that King has ever written. It's what opens up Just After Sunset, which is like neck and neck for me with Night Shift as far as being just from top to bottom the best collection of stories. Now, there's obviously weaker links in both Night Shift and in Just After Sunset, but I feel like there's more of a consistency of quality in both of those books than in Skeleton Crew, than in Everything's Eventual, than in Nightmares and Dreamscapes. I guess the only one that comes close is probably Bizarre Bad Dreams, because I felt like that one was really solid too. But Willa has a twist that I can't divulge because it'll basically spoil a lot of the story, but if I ended up in the situation of this lead character and I was trying to find my lady, and, you know, there's a train coming and we're gonna miss the train, and, you know, she stepped away for a moment and you're just trying to track her down, it's a scenario that I could just find myself in and be totally content. And it is kind of a story that has like a haunting aspect, but yet a very deep kind of resounding hopeless romanticism to it. And I really recommend the hell out of everybody checking out Willa. I think it's one of my favorite Stephen King short stories ever. If you refer back to my countdown of favorite King short stories, because I did countdowns of my favorite King shorts, my favorite novellas. I still need to do a more comprehensive one about favorite books, because I just did that top 3 way back. But yeah, Willa is a scenario I would love to find myself in if I found myself in the circumstances of the characters in it without spoiling anything. And, you know, another one, if I'm going to talk Bizarre Bad Dreams real quick, I got to talk Obits. Obits is dope. Obits is about this struggling writer who's trying to break into the world of like magazine, newspaper writing and stuff like that. And he ends up finding himself writing for this publication, which is, it's like very sensationalist tabloid kind of crap in a lot of ways, but he basically discovers that he has the power to, if he writes a story, it comes true. Yeah, it's almost like the opposite of early edition kind of thing. And he gets involved with this lady who, you know, well, she's totally using him for the ability that she discovers that he has. But how awesome would that be and just how you could use your powers for good, and you know, it's definitely one of those moral quandary kind of things, but the idea fascinates me, and I would kind of like to have that sort of, you know, self-fulfilling prophecy power that our lead in Obits has, where he can, you know, as I said before, if he writes a story, it basically comes to be, and he uses it for more nefarious things in the story, you know, namely, it's, well, by the story you can tell, obituaries, obits, where do you think he's gonna be going with this? But yeah, I would use that for the power of good, god damn it. Yeah, I totally would. And then this one may actually come out of left field for a lot of people. This is another short bordering on novella. They made a terrific John Cusack, Samuel L. Jackson movie about it. Yeah, 1408. I think it would be very cool to be this ghostly investigator going into places trying to debunk them as not actually being haunted. You know, there's people who make livings off of going into these places and, you know, alleging that they are and trying to confirm that they are. But the fascinating thing about the lead in 1408 is that he makes a living off of going into these allegedly haunted places and debunking them as being just totally whack. And, you know, they're not actually haunted. And then, of course, if anyone who's familiar with the story, he ends up in a place that is truly haunted. And so that would obviously be frightening, but yet I think kind of fascinating in the same right. So yeah, I would so go 1408 for the kind of story that I would like to find myself in. And so I guess that was just like a list of honorable mentions and stuff like that. I guess we'll jump into a few other of just longer form stories that scare the hell out of me and that I would not want to find myself in. Definitely A Good Marriage is one that comes to mind. I just finally bought myself a copy of the DVD, the adaptation that's got, I believe it has Joan Crawford. I forget the name of the male lead, but I've seen him in tons of TV work and stuff like that. He's an esteemed actor in his own right. But imagine if you all of a sudden realized that your spouse, your significant other, someone you love and have spent, you know, years, decades, however long with, in this case, you know, decades and stuff, and realize they're a serial killer, probably. What a horrible, horrible situation to find yourself in, because you second guess everything you thought to be true, but you're also probably wrestling with the quandary of still loving this person and maybe trying to explain away, you know, how this can't be true, or what the motivations could be, or, you know, should I turn them in? Are they never did anything to me. Why didn't they ever do anything to me? You know, just all of these different facets of it, of the personal wrestling that you would deal with internally about this. It is such a good novella, but damn, is it not somewhere that I would like to find myself. No siree, Bob. A Good Marriage, yeah, that is a truly, truly just, yes, I don't think anyone would want to find themselves in that. Another novella, actually, this one from 4 Past Midnight, The Langoliers. Unfortunately, the adaptation of this that I believe ABC did, if I'm not mistaken, has aged very poorly because of the weird reality-eating creatures outside of this this airport that all these people find themselves at. But if you're in that scenario where you're trapped, first and foremost, being trapped in an airport sucks ass already anyway. It just happened to me recently when I was coming back from Denver. I was trapped there for 4 hours at Denver International, and I was at the mercy of United Airlines, you bastards. You know, thankfully I eventually got back to Phoenix, and that was an amazing trip, by the way. It's so wonderful. But yeah, I gotta say though, it was that scenario has always scared me so much because, you know, first and foremost, you're trapped somewhere that you would not want to be, but you're at the mercy of a ticking clock of, you know, these reality chompers, as I mentioned, and then trying to see if you can get on a plane and go back through this vortex and all these just. Man, the having your back to the wall aspect, the trapped aspect, and also just the impending doom creeping up, plus coupled with the fact that I'm not too fond of flying anyway, and it doesn't bode well for, you know, somebody like me who, you know, aspires to cover even more things out of state and, you know, travel more in journalism, and I guess at least with, you know, my band and stuff that I play, we would presumably not be doing as much flying compared to, you know, like hitting the road, so to speak. But yeah, guys, you probably would agree with me. You wouldn't want to find yourselves in the Langoliers, now would ya? Have that guy from Perfect Strangers there with you too. Ugh. Another one that just terrifies the hell out of me in the idea of it is Revival, and I cannot sing the praises about Revival enough, guys and gals. Revival is one where it starts out and it's kind of, it's a slow burn, and that's why I've seen some people say they didn't like it very much, because, you know, just this young kid and the, you know, the strange little like friendship that he forms with this preacher who ends up kind of going off the deep end after his family dies very abruptly. And just, you already saw, you know, him experimenting with these, like, you know, these unknown currents and harnessing energy from areas that you can't really just pinpoint and stuff. Basically, energy's coming from other dimensions, and it gets so Lovecraftian in this. And as you really unravel what this guy is actually doing, and you know, his former friend that's all grown up now, and, you know, had time as a musician with a group called the Gunslingers of all things, and you know, he eventually gets back into contact with this guy, and he's like a traveling healer, you know, almost like televangelist type. And it's a story that, especially if I found myself in his shoes and you started realizing the full extent of the frightening thing and, you know, places where he is tapping into this power, my God. And the finale of Revival, absolutely nightmare-inducing. Yeah, seriously. I talked with Kristopher R. Smith, my buddy who has, you know, a couple different podcasts, currently doing a David Cronenberg podcast that I was very happy to be a part of when we talked about the Dead Zone a couple months ago. But yeah, I gotta say, the Revival is one of the scariest and the best that I think King has ever written. Not just in the current decade, not just in the post-accident new millennium. I'm talking, it's in my top 10 ever for him. And as that story really starts to rev up, it's such, my God, please no, never. I'll jump into just one more before we hit it back to some of the positives and places where I would actually like to find myself. It's gotta be Rage, man. Imagine being a student and being in that situation. There's a reason this book was banned also, by the way, anybody who knows a little bit about it. Imagine being a student and you're in high school or grade school or whatever, and just being held hostage, you know, by a student with weapons and stuff like that. And it's a book that I take major issues with because it does glorify this kid's personality. And King wrote it when he was very young, and there's a reason it's not in print anymore. And it's so sought after, especially not just in the Bachman books, you know, like you see right there, but I have long sought after, like, I have very few white whales, as I always mention on this show, and the white whales for me are essentially the original publications of those first 4 Dark Towers, and really just the paperbacks of the early Bachman stuff. Everything else I pretty much have acquired, except for, I guess, a few things, like, you know, the deluxe edition of Insomnia, the anniversary edition of Christine, which was done a couple years ago. I still need to get this new version of the Tommyknockers that PS Publishing is about to put out, because I didn't pre-order that one in time. God damn it, and I love the Tommyknockers. But yeah, I gotta say, Rage, the idea, especially of being an adolescent and at the mercy of somebody your own age that's just that crazy. It's what a horrible scenario to envision. So let's jump back over to some stuff where I would like to find myself there, you know, if I'm going to quote TBS, where you want to be. You are. Yeah, that's probably, I'm just joking around, guys, but was a short story bordering novella that King did, and it was originally a Kindle exclusive. The story basically deals with a Kindle, and I would love to be in the scenario. This has some similarities to Obits and to a few other things where, let's say you get this special pink Kindle, and when you're searching through all these different publications and news stories and stuff like that, you basically realize that it's from like another level of the tower, another alternate dimension, whatever thing, and you can search pretty much anything in this and read newspaper articles and, you know, different things from all these alternate dimensions and realities and stuff like that, and you eventually realize that you can, you know, like look forward into the future, because you can't just look at older articles, you know, on your level, in your dimension, and others. You can also look forward, you can skip ahead, and it's just, it's a very, very fascinating conundrum, and it's another one where it's a Pandora's box, man. I couldn't help myself. I would love to be in the position of possessing that sort of power that they talk about in It's got some very cool tower connections in as well. You know, you've got You've got low men that show up at one particular point, and it's, if y'all haven't read if you're a fan of the Dark Tower stories and you want to check out more connective tissue, this is a terrific one, and one that is essential reading, in my opinion, and a story that I would love to find myself in. So let's jump into another one. This one, if I remember correctly, oh boy, I want to say it's Nightmares and Dreamscapes, but I can't, yeah, I think it's Nightmares and Dreamscapes, but it's called The 10 O'Clock People. And The 10 O'Clock People is about, it's got a very They Live type vibe to it, and they've been talking about trying to make this into a movie for the longest time, but I would love to possess the power of, you know, so if you're a smoker, you're on one side of the fence. And if you have completely quit and are long removed, you're from the other side of the fence. But if you're one of those in-betweeners where you're just, you're trying to kick the habit, but there's still enough of it in your system kind of thing, you basically, it's almost like putting on the sunglasses, man, and you can see that people in positions of power and also just regulars that surround you are not who they appear to be, and they're this crazy alternate race that's hiding behind this masked facade. And this protagonist in the story stumbles upon this group where they're all former smokers and they all are aware of this fact, and it's really fascinating. And I would love to have access to those glasses, to that perspective, to really know what's truly going on in this world, if in fact that was the case. I think The 10 O'Clock People, if I remember correctly, I did list it on my favorite short stories countdown of all time, and with good reason. This one is damn good. And yeah, it's a tale that I would love to be a part of. I would love to, you know, just have that perspective. I think, yeah, 10 O'Clock People, man, that is definitely another one. And another shorter form King story, and this is one that I would just want to be in for the sheer fact of when it takes place, for the sheer fact that I've always been kind of fascinated with, you know, fairs and amusement parks and stuff like that, because I have such fond memories of going with my yaya, my Greek grandmother, when I was really little. Joyland is great. And I just did a 5-year anniversary video about it recently, and I've had many people tell me that I was born in the wrong decade, and you know, for better or for worse, I'm here, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you, and with so much more King stuff to read about. But Joyland taking place in the early 70s, from just the amazing music that was going on at that time to just, you know, the simplicity and the innocence and all that other stuff. It's a great coming-of-age story. I would love to be either in the protagonist's shoes or just part of, you know, his little clique of friends, maybe just a fourth person in that little group that, you know, just really is, you know, just having a blast, you know, just working at this park. And, you know, just 'cause I'm a big fan of Adventureland too. I love that movie. It's one of the few good performances from Kristen Stewart. Although, you know, Kristen Stewart's pretty much good in everything but Twilight, in my opinion. American Ultra, that's another good one. But yeah, I would love to be in the Joyland story based on just the time period that it takes place in, and the whole, I love coming of age stories. I'm working on one of my own and have for a number of years. It's about the first year of my life right after high school, and yeah, I'm not going to tell you the title or any details beyond that. I've talked to a few close friends about it. It has a title, and it has a damn good title, and hopefully you will see that, you know, come through the pipeline at some point in time. But yeah, I just love these sort of stories, and I love period pieces, especially ones that take place in eras where I really think I would have felt right at home. So Joyland is, you know, it's one of those King bits that I would love to find myself in. And yeah, just the last one that I will mention, and this isn't higher on the list. Now, there's not really any particular ranking to this, so to speak, but I was starting with short stories and then going into more obscure, and then I'll eventually end with heavy hitters. But this is a heavy hitter that some may think could go either way, and I'm going to say it because of the sheer fact that it is one of those that could probably go either way, in all honesty. But I reached to it because of the fact that even before I saw it, I saw something when I was very, very young, like the Monster Squad. And I prefer the Monster Squad to Goonies and lots of other stuff because it's not just kids being kids and going on an adventure. It's kids genuinely fighting evil, like evil. And while the idea of being an adult in Stephen King's It scares the crap out of me and could probably go to the other side, just the connective, just closeness of the Losers Club in the child's portioning alone, it really just... It reminds me of my youth, and I think there's something so endearing about children going on adventures to that degree. that's why you have to read the book, even though everyone's so excited about Chapter 2. There's so many mixed opinions about both the remake and the original miniseries. I honestly really enjoy them both for different reasons. But yeah, I would love to be a part of the Children's Losers Club. I really would. I don't know if I would want to be somebody else, you know, in the story. That's where it would go into the, you know, count me out territory. You know, where if you were just one of the townspeople in a different era that had to deal with, you know, insane lumberjacks or, you know, crazy shootouts with mobsters or, you know, the burning down of, you know, factories where they're doing egg hunts and stuff like that, and, you know, the loss of your children. I definitely do not like the idea of being anybody except for the Losers Club in Stephen King's It, but, you know, as a whole, if I could choose, and this is all figuratively speaking, right, I mean, I would love to be a part of, yes, at least the Children's Losers Club and all of their awesome adventures, because they all came out unscathed, too. So, if we're going to jump back into a few other heavy hitters, and I know I don't want the video to be too short, but I don't want it to go forever either, so I might just tag team these next two, because both of these are the most frightening scenario of being trapped, and very similar to the Langoliers, but in this situation, you're trapped, like, to a bed. You know, you have to mention both Misery and Gerald's Game in the same breath, because holy shnikes, would that not be just as scarific and just horrible of a situation to find yourself in? You know, and they're so different in the fact that in Misery, you've got your #1 fan, and you've been injured, and you're at her will, and I mean, you start to see the shades of the insanity over time, and it just gets progressively worse and worse and worse. But, you know, and on the other side, with Gerald's Game, which was so wonderfully adapted by Mike Flanagan, and that's not to discount in any way, shape, or form Rob Reiner's amazing adaptation too, with, you know, Con and Kathy Bates. But Gugino did such a good job in Gerald's Game too. She carried that whole movie her damn self. But you know, being handcuffed to the bed after trying to get down on the get down, you got some hanky-panky going, and your husband, your significant other, whatever you want to envision it as, is suddenly dead. Because I've been chained to beds before and things like that, and how horrible of a scenario. Whether you're a man or a woman, you know, if you're in total isolation, and in both of these stories, you're in total isolation. In one, you have somebody who, you know, could either kill you at any time, or, you know, just let you keep on going, or in, you know, Gugino's case, in Gerald's Game, yeah, you have nobody who's going to help you, and you have to basically, you have to be smarter than the situation, or inevitably disfigure yourself to escape. And my God, just both of those, even thinking about them, it makes my skin crawl. They would be so incredibly horrible. Another one that I have to mention, you don't see it on the shelf here because I'm still waiting on my amazing peeps at Cemetery Dance to get the deluxe illustrated version of Sleeping Beauties to me. But as a man myself, I can't even envision how horrible it would be if pretty much all the women all of a sudden in this world were gone. You know, they're all Sleeping Beauties. They're all, you know, in these cocoon-like states. If you try to awaken them, you know, they go like super George Romero, the crazy status, and, you know, they'll kill and dismember and, you know, insanely. I love women, and I love I mean, we're all birthed from mothers, right? And, you know, Mother Earth and Mother Nature and all of these different things, and just the tender, caring compassion of, you know, of a great woman in your life or something like that, you know, whatever it may be. Yeah, there'd be such a gaping void in all of civilization, and honestly, all of us men would, we'd destroy everything. I think we really truly would, and there's a lot of fascinating things explored in that book about just, you know, men left to their own devices and how absolutely terrible that would be. And that's why I would never, ever, ever want to stare down something like that, man. My Lord in heaven, would that be bad. So I'm going to leave these last four of the terrible scenarios and jump back to some places where I would like to see myself. I think Doohickey, I sing the praises of this film. Not film, it needs to be a film. Why isn't it a film yet? They're adapting everything else. They're even finally doing From a Buick 8. We still don't have anything from Doohickey. But Doohickey is, it's a crazy situation in the whole phantom limb syndrome and the things that they explore within that, but I would love to suddenly, it would not be wonderful to be disfigured or dismembered or whatever, but if you suddenly had this new, just in-tuned ability, especially of the artistic variety, you know, for me, I can't draw. It's something that I just do not have the ability to, and it's something that I've tried very, very hard at. You know, I was looking at an amazing illustration that, you know, a longtime supporter of the show, Eva, put up, where it was like, you know, it was the prisoner and it was like the chain shackles and it was representative of Eddie Dean and stuff like that. And so many other, you know, CRs and Hale people have put up just great bits of art from, you know, whether it's Tower Tuesday, hashtag every Tuesday, Tower Tuesday, put your stuff up. You know, I'm so astounded by people with a visual artistic ability compared to me where, you know, I'm good with words, I'm good with, you know, sounds and bashing on things as a drummer and whatnot. But, I mean, to have that ability would be amazing, and also to be hanging out with a dude as awesome as Wireman would just be the shiznito bam. Granted, there's spooky elements and there's horrible things your character ends up having to go through because it's a Stephen King book, but I would be okay, I guess, with, you know, the Doohickey scenario if I had to choose. And we'll knock out similar to what I did with Misery and Gerald's Game, these next two simultaneously. I felt like mentioning any of the Tower books, like the specific Tower books, would be kind of a cop-out, because if you said that your favorite place that you could enter book-wise would be the Dark Tower, Stephen King, that's where you're like, well, that's not technically very fair, because of the fact that the Dark Tower essentially ties in with practically every Stephen King book, period. Or at least all Stephen King books kind of can, with the mythology he's constructed in the multiverses and whatnot, they can all tie back. And so maybe that's a cop-out, but if there is an iteration of the Tower that I would love to be a part of, it would definitely be the books 3 and 4, where, you know, they tie together so masterfully. As much as I would love to be part of young Roland's quartet, you know, going to Hambry and being in Magus and everything, you know, I think in some ways I would rather be, like, I would probably be Bert, honestly, you know, if I was with the young quartet. And with the older quartet, I would probably just want to be another tag-along person, like, or just Roland himself, you know, basically. I think that would probably be more up to my speed. But the Wastelands and Wizard and Glass are so awesome, and I love that iteration of them, you know, going to Lud and escaping, you know, the clutches of Blaine, and, you know, going through the ravaged Topeka, which is an alternate reality, tying together with the story stuff of Captain Trips from the Stand and stuff like that. And oh boy, and then finally encountering Flag and the Emerald Castle, all that. Like, those are the adventures that I would more so than any other stuff, whether, you know, I mean, going to, you know, Calvin Sturgis and, you know, eventually getting the Thunderclap and all that stuff. Of every story and adventure that they go on in the Tower, that's where I would like to be. I would like to be right there for 3 and 4, you know, as Roland, you know. I think that would be just so rad status. I would love to be there. And so now we're on our last 4, peeps, and so I think let's just run through the last 4 that I would not want to find myself a part of. Under the Dome would suck, totally suck, especially with the thinking of rationing food and water eventually, the mass hysteria that would eventually start to set in, and it would be way worse than some of the hysteria you would see in something like Sleeping Beauties or some of the other doomsday scenarios, because of the fact that you're completely enclosed in. So there's that back to the wall mentality that you have in something like The Mist or in the Langoliers, and yet with more, I don't know, the whole subplots about the meth cooking and, you know, just, I don't know, man. I'm not the biggest fan of Under the Dome, either the TV series or the book, as I've mentioned on this program before, but I think that's, and also not knowing the nature of what has put this, you know, just this trap on top of you, I'm just not, it scares me, man. I would not want to be part of Under the Dome. No, sorry, Big Jim, no thank you. And this is a shout out to Rob, Mr. Rubber Soul. Boy, I think being in the Regulators would suck. Being in the Regulators would suck. Being in, you know, it's another situation of being, it's got some of that rage flavor of being trapped and being terrorized and stuff. And, you know, all of those moto cops, you know, coming and just mowing down people, and you're in suburban Ohio, and just, I mean, especially if there was some sort of weird, like, twinny connection, you know, like weird misplaced memory link, whatever sort of thing, with the fact that, you know, at about this same, you know, time of synchronicity in another dimension, the person who represents you is still alive and you die or whatever horrible sort of thing. But just the Regulars is really violent, man. It's a Bachman book. You have to keep that in mind. And so that is another scenario that I think would just be, I mean, it's so violently bloodthirsty, frightening to just be at the mercy of just being mowed down at any whim and trying to make your way through a suburb which is supposed to be the essence of tranquility and, you know, safety from the big scary city and all of that. I mean, the Regulators was one of the first 3 things that I wrote down here when I was just really thinking of just terrible situations and things to find yourself in the midst of. The Regulators, man, would be super scary. And another one has to be another Bachman book, being The Long Walk. And that's because of the fact that The Long Walk is the epitome of lost innocence for me. I'm so glad and just overjoyed they're finally making it into a movie, because The Long Walk, it's about all of these kids, you know, who, you know, they're basically on a march. It's got the same flavors of, you know, Hunger Games, which ripped off Battle Royale, which ripped off probably The Running Man and some other Italian film somebody recently brought to my attention. But, I mean, if you don't keep up the pace, if you walk outside the borders, you get strikes and you eventually get killed. And it just, the fact that you would eventually be seeing your friends die. People who, I mean, you know, other kindred spirits, other kids, ones that you've become friends with, you've made connections with. It's almost like the much darker underbelly of something like Stand By Me or It. And I talked about that in a recent video. Having to just get that cutthroat, I couldn't do it, man. I really couldn't. And that's why it's so scary to me, just the idea of, first and foremost, being young and naive and just having to, I mean, talk about a maturing process that The Long Walk would be. My God. So I'm going to save the last one for, you know, for here at the end, but let's talk about 3 more of the others, which would be scenarios I would love to find myself in. Mr. Mercedes trilogy. I'm kind of becoming more fascinated by detective work than I was in years past, and, you know, that is due to the fact that I've read so much of this later Sai King stuff, like Joyland, where there's kind of a, you know, whodunit murder mystery aspect to it. Same with the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. I love Mr. Mercedes. I really love Finders Keepers. Finders Keepers in some way may be my favorite of the trilogy because Brady's not really in it, and it's so different, yet still has callbacks to stuff, but yet the villain is this crazy book collector coming out of prison, and he goes after this kid that finds these buried manuscripts, and it's so different, and it appealed so much to the fervent fandom of myself with Sai King, and it is borderline obsessive at some level, as y'all can see. Finders Keepers is so good, man, and it really kind of bums me out that presumably they're skipping over that essence of the story to just jump right into more Brady for this 2nd season of Mr. Mercedes on the AT&T Audience Network and just get right to End of Watch, where things get a little supernatural. But I would love to be a part of a team like, you know, like Hodges puts together, you know, with just basically his detective crew that he puts together is just so awesome with Jerome, and the name of the girl is totally eluding me and I feel so bad for it, but yeah, she's an awesome character that pops up in another King book that I'm not going to divulge, but that, you know, The Outsider is even, you know, more about detective sleuthiness and stuff like that. But if I was to choose one as far as just, you know, investigative and just, you know, just lots of personality and just lots of cool intrigue and mystery, Mr. Mercedes would be dope to be in. Next up, everybody knows that I love being a vampire. I, you know, talk about fangers and stuff. I had the privilege to actually play one in a short film that we did here on the horror show. But man, Salem's Lot would be super dope to be somebody trying to cleanse. I'm thinking more so like a continuation. And yeah, it could be following, you know, Mears and Mark, or, and I mean, you know, like both of them. I could step into either of their shoes. And, you know, if you're going to just nail down more cells of vampies or whatever, I mean, where could, you know, Barlow have been beforehand, you know, maybe trying to, you know, trace it back to the source or other hives of vampirs, so whatever, man. I think that would be just such a rad story to find myself in the midst of, not playing a vampy, being on the other side of the coin, you know, going after the fangers this time and stuff. I think that would be super rad status, and I know a very, very special viewer who I know confided that that would be the choice as well. Man, this is, again, similar to when I mentioned the regulators just a second ago. The Talisman is another that I am so relieved is finally, well, presumably finally going to be put into development, but I'll believe it when I see it. It was supposed to be a TNT series. It's had various incarnations. Amblin currently attached to make it into a film, not a series. I think it would function better as a series, possibly, but the Talisman is so awesome in the fact that just the journeys of Mark Sawyer, or Jack Sawyer, I should say. Mark, I'm thinking of Petrie. But yeah, the journeys of Jack Sawyer in this, and you know, Black House is pretty cool too, and I guess I would love to, I relate so much, once again, to kids having adventures and stuff like that, and just, it puts me back in the shoes, and you know, there was so much awesome world building that ended up seeping into the Tower series that was done with stuff like the Eyes of the Dragon and with, you know, the Talisman, and just to be that kid jumping between, you know, different dimensions between our world and the territories, and, you know, trying to save your mother. You know, it's similar themes that we see explored and that I adored so much in the Wind Through the Keyholes story within the story within the story. I love, love, love that story, and so that's another one that I would probably honorably mention. But the Talisman is so good because of the fact that, you know, it has, there's thrills, there's friends, there's creatures, there's just so much craziness. I cannot wait to see it, hopefully, you know, make it to the screen sometime soon, because I cannot recommend the Talisman enough, and it's a world that I would love to be in. You know, I would love to relive my youth and have a fantastic adventure. You know, just man, you know, King and Straub, you know, I have to give Straub credit here too, since they did both that and Black House together, and there's still rumors about them having an idea for a third book, which excites me thoroughly. So let's go to, I guess this is probably my unofficial #1 for each of the categories, you know, for where I want to be and where I would definitely not want to be. So where I would not want to be, I would not want to be in the stand. No siree Bob. And I saw some people in the comments to Josh Pruitt's post, you know, they were just like, I'd love to be in the stand as long as I got to survive it, but I think that that's kind of a cop-out to a slight degree, because it's like, you know, you have to be there as Captain Trips is first hitting, and honestly, I don't personally like 99-1 odds. No gracias, y'all. I would not be down for that. And what a terrifying, lawless world to be in. Like, I mean, Cell is another one. You know, all the post-apocalyptic stories are ones that I would not want to find myself in the midst of, but I think the stand would be the most terrifying to be in, because, you know, just your friends and your family are all dead, and, you know, just the worry of, if you do find love, you know, you're in the Stu and Franny situation where there's no guarantees your child is gonna be immune just because the both of you are, and you know, the forces of evil, and you know, the fact that civilization, you know, you can think you have structure in Boulder or whatever, and there's no guarantees, and you know, just the whole the religious war and the fear of, you know, people in Vegas with, you know, nuclear destruction, all these different things. I think that, especially with the religious aspect and then the lack thereof and all these different things, having horrible nightmarish dreams, being plagued by that sort of stuff, I mean, The Stand is probably my favorite Stephen King story. As I've mentioned here before, it fluctuates between The Stand, Pet Sematary, and It. That's the holy trinity of King stories for me, but The Stand is the situation that less than anything I would want to, I don't know, I guess, well, you know, Misery and Gerald's Game were pretty bad too, but you know, it just, I don't know, just this situation has always terrified me. But if I'm going to go with my unofficial, once again, my #1 place, you know, story that I would like to inhabit, it would definitely be 11/22/63. I have been fascinated by time travel since I was a little kid. Back to the Future, thank you so very much for instilling that within me. #2 is my personal favorite. I know it's not for a lot of people, but you know, it was the whole, you know, the double down aspect, you know, whether it's Phantasm 2 or Aliens or whatever. I love sequels that just go, they double down on the bonkers wackiness of it, and I love Back to the Future 2, going to the future, going, you know, back to alternate timelines and all this different stuff. Y'all have heard me talk about alternate timeline stuff here, but just the I also love period pieces. The idea of trying to do something so righteous as avert one of the worst assassinations in history. But I'm also fascinated by the reverberating, you know, aspect of, you know, oh, well, if you change history, what else would be changed and stuff like that. But I am a firm believer in going back and trying to change things for the better, maybe. I don't know. I just love time travel. I absolutely adore it. It's always been fascinating to me. And, you know, I would really... of any King story, especially based on the era that I would be traveling back to and the fact that, you know, just being able to spend so much time there and not have the clock just ticking, ticking, ticking like Majora's Mask status or some shizzle like that. I would just love to be, I would oh so love to be in 11/22/63. That's the one that really hits home the most, I think. And you know what? Even though that's what I'm kind of leaving as the, you know, I have to throw one more thing out because I actually got to exist in a Stephen King story, Stephen King co-written, you know, created story, and it's right here. I actually got to be a part of the American Vampire universe because here at the horror show, we did our own short that fit into the mythology of the Stephen King portion of this story. So this is the very first edition of a ongoing series called American Vampire. Scott Snyder, Raphael Albuquerque, and Stephen King. Stephen King basically wrote the origin story of this vampire by the name of Skinner Sweet, and he is just a utter badass, as you can see right here. Yeah, that's the dude. I've cosplayed as him many times, and that was actually where Cecil and I got the idea to do a short that takes place right after the Stephen King written portion of this graphic novel. If you have any interest in checking it out, if you haven't before, it's here on the horror show, and I will make sure to toss a link to it in there. But if there's any world I would like to play in again, my God, we have ideas for further installments of this. But yeah, I actually got to live a dream and actually be in a Stephen King story that I always wanted to be a part of. So yeah, that's pretty cool, right? So wow, that was exhaustive, wasn't it? I gotta extend the grande gracias to everybody who actually stuck around for the full extent of this. Just Fuego sitting in a room talking for about an hour to himself, and thankfully there's people in cyberspace listening or something. But, you know, I'm passionate about this topic. I could go for hours about this stuff. So, yes, thanks so very much to all of the constant readers, viewers who supported this program for this being the 91st episode. I have to give another shout out to the fact that September 1st, Saturday, September 1st at 19:19, I guess that's going to be about 7:19 Pacific Standard Time, we're going to be going live on the Horror Show Facebook, and it's going to be basically the 100th episode spectacular. It's also going to be airing on YouTube as well, but you can't go live on YouTube because we still have our limitations in place, at least for the next month and a half or so. But it's going to be a big celebration. We're going to be doing an AMA. I'm going to be presenting some material all about different viewers who have either loved Sai King or discovered this show, good memories about either one of those. Also, if you want to send me any just photos, lots of people on the Hail to Stephen King Facebook thread have been doing it in the Facebook group, just, you know, pictures of their collections and stuff like that. If you have a small video you want to send me, do it at my business email below, infuegomedia@gmail.com. And yeah, if you have any, like I said, memories, pictures of your collection, whatever you want to send, I'm putting together like a master edit, which will be on the YouTube portion of this. Very excited for that. There's going to be some giveaways, some Coexist shirts, some Stephen King memorabilia, trivia stuff. It's going to be just a big, huge celebration of not me and everything I've done with this show, but everything that, you know, all of you have made this show with your constant, you know, love, support, and just it means the world to me. It is humbling and honoring just to see how not just the show has grown, but how I continue to see the Facebook group grow as well. If you want to follow me on the interwebs of sorts, I'm on all social media sectors, just like you're seeing it spelled below. Jaime in Fuego, not Jamie. Gosh, dang it. Yeah, Jaime in Fuego, just like you see it spelled below. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and yes, I do appreciate any sort of interactions on there. Always love your insights and, you know, wits and smack talking, whatever the heck it may be. And if you haven't subscribed here on The Horror Show, make sure to hit that button, hit that bell so you get notifications about any time we put up our 2 to 3 episodes every single day, whether they're film reviews, trailer reactions, episodes of Hail to Stephen King here with the quartet that is all of you. We do so many other things, convention coverage, video game Let's Plays. It is a ton of fun. We don't like to consider ourselves the best horror YouTube channel, but the most prolific, although I gotta say Sinister Cinema comes pretty damn close. So in any event, until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, everyone, hasta luego, sin amigos, cinema, amigos. They come together and they form sin amigos. So gracias to all of you. I hope that we get to see one another sooner rather than later. I'm hoping that we are well met until then, and when that reemergence of all of us together occurs, remember, stay scared. And read Stephen King. If you haven't read 11/22/63 or The Stand, they're both massive tomes, but yeah, they will enrich your life. Oh, so very